Okay, good morning ladies and gents. Okay, we are starting our third week, first lesson of the week. We're still in Trig. At the end of last week, we learned how to use Trig to find an unknown side in a right angle triangle. Today we're going to learn how to find an unknown angle. Okay? Now, these are the two problems we're going to try and find out. Okay, we're going to try and find out what theta is here and what, I'll use another letter here. Let's call it alpha. Alpha is another letter that we use for angles. Alpha, it looks like this if you can't see it. Okay, a little big, it looks like a little fish. Okay, so the A in Greek. Okay, now I think it's a good idea whenever you do trig, especially in the first year or two, is to write all the relationship for the basic relation for sine, cosine, and tan. So that's a good starting point. Sine theta is the opposite side divided by hypotenuse. Cosine is the adjacent divided by hypotenuse. And tan theta is the opposite divided by the adjacent. Okay, that's a good way to just start to remind us. It really is important that at some point, not now, but maybe towards the end of the year, that you really remember that. Because you remember the complexity of the problems will get bigger. So you would not want to spend too much time remember these things, because your mind will have to be busy with the complex stuff. So the basic stuff, you need to know like that. I'm not expecting to be there now, it's just the beginning, but by the end of grade 10. Okay, so let's have a look at this first triangle. 10, we know this side is 10, this is 16. Now, this is the angle, theta. So remember, we need to define what's the reference angle. In this case, it's this. It's not that one, it's this. Okay? So with respect to theta, that's obviously the hypotenuse. Okay? Not just with theta. Okay? It's the hypotenuse, this triangle. But what I've got to ask myself is, what is the 10? Is the 10 the opposite to theta? Or is it adjacent? Well, it is adjacent, isn't it? So if I write 10 divided by 16, that's going to be the adjacent divided by hypotenuse. So what's that to do with theta? Is it sine theta, cosine, tan theta? Okay? I can see here, and if I wrote it here, if that's in front of you, like I said, you should really do it, you can see it's cosine theta. Okay? So cosine theta is 10 over 16. Now here I've got a little bit of a problem. Okay? Last week when we learned to work with a calculator, I showed you how to say, let's say, you've got cosine 54, okay? If you're given an angle, okay, and you want to find out the ratio, you put cosine 54. You just write cosine, usually you've got these brackets, you get a ratio, okay? So if I have, let's say, an angle, let's say theta, and I want to find out a ratio, okay, what I'm going to do is put a cosine in front of it. In the calculator, write down, well, not COS, you just got cosine button, you press, boom, you put an angle, you get a ratio. Now we've got the opposite, isn't it? We've got a ratio, but we want to find out the angle. We don't want to know what the ratio is. We know what the ratio, we want to know what the angle is. So I've got a ratio, and I want to find out the angle. Now, later on this year, we're going to learn about this concept called inverse function, okay? But I can already kind of give you an explanation here. Cosine is a function. Okay, what is a function? It's a machine. You put in a number, it spits out another number. So you put an angle, you get a ratio. That's a machine called cosine. So that means there must be another function that takes a ratio and brings you back the same angle. And that machine is called an inverse function. It's inverse to cosine. It's like the opposite. Okay? Now, what's the inverse function of cosine? Okay, another function called cosine power minus 1. Okay? Right? It's not that we're raising cosine to the power of minus 1. It's just that's how we draw an inverse function. Okay? So cosine minus 1 takes a ratio and gives you the angle. Okay? So in your calculator, what you're going to have to do is find that button, and I'll tell you where it is. Okay, the cosine minus 1, it's the opposite function to cosine. Okay, and you put in 10 over 16 also in brackets, just like we did for when we put the angle. Now, where is it? How are you going to get to that cosine minus 1? Okay, if you look at cosine button, above it there's cosine minus 1. So all we got to do is press shift in cosine, and then you see it will be cosine minus 1. Brackets open themselves. You say 10 divided by 16. You just close the brackets. And if I press equal, I get 51,31. 51,31. Okay, and let's put degrees on it. Important. Okay, so that was one example. How do we go from ratio to an angle? Okay, I'll put in another little video, just another example, and then you'll be ready to do exercise 5.